Okay, I see.
You'll be live soon. Yep.
Yep. Let me just check to make sure everybody can hear. We're now live. Lovely. Everyone, we'll just do a quick sound check. If people can just ping in chat if you can hear us okay, that would be great. Okay, Ben, there's a yeah, we're good to go. Okay, thanks for attending.
Right.
You're in the session for moving from product management to portfolio management, managing products, initiatives, strategies, and execution across our product portfolio with Julianne Reda. And she is an innovative and data-driven product management executive in both the consumer and business marketplace. She has 15 plus years of product management experience, including the strategic development, design, and research, personalization of platform and AI. Julianne has talent to coach and steer teams in the product development lifecycle from product concept to execution for market growth and portfolio development. She also has a solid analysis and problem-solving acumen pooled with strong understanding of emerging technologies. My name is Paul Save. I'm a director of product at IQ Metrics, and I'll be moderating here today. So I'll be watching the chat as closely as I can, as well as Q&A. If you have questions, there is tabs up on the right. If you've been in other sessions, you're probably familiar. If you're just joining fresh off the start right now, feel free to submit questions into Q&A. There are numerous breakpoints throughout the presentation where we can then surface these questions and have Julianne answer them. But without further ado, Julianne.
Hi, I'm Julianne Reda. I am the VP of Product at Focus Vision. We have a portfolio of products in market research, user research, and CX. So we provide qualitative and quantitative tools for innovation, marketing, market research, etc. So I really joined an organization where I could eat my own dog food in terms of research. So that's been a really good thing. We currently have, just so you know, an open position for our product marketing manager to help us with the portfolio, since people were asking if there's any openings. There is an opening. And then we are merging with a competitor, Confirm It. And I expect there to be additional openings in product probably in about a month once that merger has completed. So just a heads up on my background. So we'll be going through product and portfolio management. A little bit about me. I moved to Portland about 10 years ago, but I came from B2C.com. So Fox.com, Disneyland.com, SonyPictures.com. All of these were products that were in a consumer portfolio where I had a specific focus on selling tickets in Disneyland or moving and splitting a product from Fox Broadcasting to back to the studio at Fox, or just helping distribute Sony Pictures information to all of the theater holders. So that's a little bit about me, but within the products, there's of course portfolios of products we sold for Wagner Edstrom, Chalkstone, Heartland Pavement Systems, Yes Man, and of course now at Focus Vision. So these companies can be small, like very startup with 20 people and you have a portfolio, or very large like a Disney where there's thousands of products that are available. I just want to give a little bit about that. And then I'll just do what we have. I'll go through what I've covered, which is how do you manage the portfolio, especially with cross-functional stakeholders? Because usually if you're managing a portfolio, it's not just about what do you have in your next sprint. It's the longer tail of where is this going to unfold within the next 3 years, 2 years, 5 years. You have to make decisions on what's best for the portfolio, not just individual products. And that needs input from several stakeholders in the organization. And then we'll just go through business strategy and questions. But there will be a question section after finance, design, engineering, and marketing for you to ask questions about situations you might be facing in managing your portfolio or looking forward to managing a portfolio. So first we'll talk about definitions. There's a product definition really from Investopedia that defines a product portfolio is a collection of all the products or services offered by a company. And it's essential for stakeholders looking at research that they support financial planning 4-product portfolio, which is why I'm starting with finance in terms of managing that portfolio. In actuality, if you're managing a product, there could be 2 products you're managing, that's a portfolio, 2 versions of a product, potentially for 2 different markets. I would define that as a portfolio because you're making trade-off decisions. Products plus add-on modules that you may be bringing to market or sunsetting from the product. And then, of course, a suite of products or products and services together. So this is looking at whole solutions, which is very common, especially in the enterprise market with highly sophisticated products. So that's how we define products in the portfolio. The next part is really going to be looking at the stakeholders definition. So I'm going to be focusing on you, which I'm assuming you're a senior product manager, a manager or product management, a director, potentially even a VP. And now you have to go up managing your product managers with 4 of the distinct areas in the product. I didn't put in ops here, for example, and I didn't put necessarily the CEO, but a lot of these stakeholders that you have are critical for you managing a portfolio. So we'll start with finance. So finance is really what I would recommend you do if you're starting to manage the portfolio, is start to ask the questions under the hood about what is the revenue model for each of these products. Do you have a financial model for the company? And that really tells you, how does this business operate? How profitable is this product? And what is the market trajectory of making your product successful in market? So these are the questions that you'd want to understand. Typically, if you're in a larger company, I would look for somebody with the title of financial analyst or director of corporate strategy or financial strategy or commercial strategy to have this and manage this, especially for the CFO. The other good things to ask is, if they're a strategic thinker, you can ask them to say, what are really the levers and risks that go into making the model for that product? And then they will know, because in many cases, they're putting the projections forward. Ask them directly, especially if you're inheriting something, what's the perception of each product in the portfolio? Do they think it's just a cash cow? Do they think it should be sunsetted? Do they think that it's a pet project? It's good to just kind of say, what is your take of this portfolio? And then, of course, do you have numbers on market share, growth, revenue, and any revenue potentials for these products, so that you can look at whether we're well invested to make this product grow, or potentially under invested, or this product is in the red but nobody has time to sunset it. So that's a good question to ask your finance partner. And finance partners are great if you have a list of riskiest assumptions and you need research to de-risk them, or you need research in order to prove out whether or not your financial model, for example, or your pricing model would make sense to the buyers of your product. So that's kind of where I would start with finance, just to introduce conversations about the portfolio. The next part is the business factors to consider. So if you have a portfolio, you want to define, where is each of my products or each of my major initiatives for that product, which might be adding a module that is a buy-up for an enterprise product, moving a product from beta to launch. But what you want to have is a portfolio view of all of your products side by side. Beta, it's in launch, it's in grow, which is I'm growing market share now that we've launched it. Sustain, meaning that I'm going to keep it competitive in market, but not huge investments, because it may be a shrinking market, or this is a candidate to sunset. So that's really, when I kind of present the portfolio, I present, where are we at with the revenue potential for this product, and where would we categorize it from a life cycle perspective? And then you define the market share potentials for the product. So how big is this market that we want to go after? They often call that the TAM, which is how much do people demand for this product? how much within our service model could we potentially address? So could we take 10% of that market? Could we grow it to 20%? And then underneath that, you'd be working with finance to figure out what is it going to cost from investment in feature set and marketing to grow that. And then what are the practical limits of what we think we can actually capture based upon our business model? And this is often CFO strategy finance type of things, but we want to be able to at least start off with, can we get the TAM, SAM, sum of the market in order to make sure that we could have financial projections against it. High market share, which would be like we have 70, 50% even of a market, is something that is earned or bought. So you have a differentiated product out there, different and better than everybody else's, or you acquired a product that has that market share with it. So I would say if you're one of a rookie move would be saying we're going to take 80% of a market if you don't have any data that says it's truly differentiated. So that's just something to consider as a rule of thumb. The growth rate, so usually when you have a product like you've got your MVP out there, you're going to say, I'm going to be in the red until I get to this point, and then we're going to see growth for that product with these different metrics. And it may be customer satisfaction, it may be reduced churn, but what is the growth rate and cash to get to that product being profitable or growing market share? What are the risk factors of what, risk to the product? What's going to be the payoff? And then product management and strategies factors. So if you sit with finance, I typically go through, here's my riskiest assumptions moving this product from beta into launch, or from moving from one part of the product lifecycle into the other. And how would I make that less of a strong variable in the financial model? That's typically the conversations I've had with finance. Believe it or not, if you, like me, don't come from finance, there's things that you can do to close that gap, because as people are getting better at building viable, desirable products from a design perspective and a CX perspective, and it's easier to scale with cloud-based technologies, product management is all about managing risk to a product, making sure it's viable and differentiated and makes money. So the more that you can learn about financial models, the more you can find a partner in finance, the easier it is to align language and strategy to the same outcomes. And I think the most important thing is you're going to be providing them leading indicators of managing risk as you get to beta, so that they know that these are the leading indicators that tell us we're on the right path or the wrong path. And then you start being able to having conversations around pivot, persevere, or stop in terms of product development, because they'll be aligned with you on leading indicators and you'll be aligned with them on managing risk to building out that model. So with that, and I know that I jumped deep into financial models, step one, but I would say that if you're like me, that you learn on the cheap. I liked LinkedIn, the Learning Academy, or the learning section for LinkedIn, in order to learn about financial models. I also, pre-COVID, bring people out for coffee. And then I get to find people in the organization that have the word financial strategy or commercialization in order to align with them to get this data and for us to walk through the model so I understand the levers, because this is the levers that you're going to build into your strategy. Okay, so I know I talk fast. Are there questions on this? I'm just trying to get there's my slideshow. There we go. Any questions before I move on?
So I'm looking here, we haven't had any seated just yet, unless somehow my chat is a little bit slow and not updating as quick as it should be. Okay. But I have maybe a question to ask here as well, and everyone else, please feel free to add in questions here as well. So what would you consider a good market size? What size should be the bar for people when they're looking for a good size market?
I would look at at the minimum, like triple digits, double digits maybe, but on the upper hand of millions. So a $10 million market is not a big market. $100 million market is still not the greatest. So, you know, you want to keep your eyes big on where is the large opportunities. If you have a $2 million market, that's tiny and you're going to struggle to get funding, right? And even a $20 million market, there's still, you're going to be cut by the SAM and the sum in terms of what you can achieve out of that market. But if somebody tells you there's a $5 billion market and it's growing, then that's really good. So I was just thinking today about what I might give as examples of growing markets from our own industry. What we have seen done, and again, I'm market research, guess which is the shrinking market? In-person focus groups. It's really hard to do in-person focus groups during COVID. Guess which market is growing? Digital focus groups. We just launched a new version of our product that does digital focus groups, but you kind of think like these are fluid markets that will change based upon the environment, acts like COVID, and grow and shrink based upon consumer and market demand. So the other thing, rule of thumb, is you can get a lot of this information from Google searches, but make sure that it's no more than 2, at most 3 years old, because markets change a lot, especially post-COVID. The first thing I was asked when we stepped into COVID is, how do you anticipate COVID impacting your business and your product suite? And we made investment shifts because we saw immediate changes in-person versus digital focus groups. So that's something to consider.
Great, thank you.
Any other questions?
A comment here saying, you know, they were going to get asked for recommendations for a crash course in financial models, but you got there, so thanks for that.
Yes, yeah, and even just, you know, financial models for dummies is great. If you have people that you work with in finance that just say, hey, I want to understand financial models, if they're a peer, they'll walk you through something so that, because they know if you're on board with financial models, they're going to have a better financial model because you bring the insight, the research, the risk to the model, and they need that in order to be closer to reality. That makes sense. So it's a symbiotic relationship.
Great, thank you. As more questions come up, then at the next break point, I can jump in there, but thank you.
Sure. This is another example. I believe this is from McKinsey or Bain, but they basically said, what are the 4 areas that you place portfolios in? And this is an example of the 4 quadrants of potential for products. So star products, they have a market that's growing. So electronic cars, there's a growing market, and then what the relative market share, if it's high, then you're probably going to get good earnings. That's why it's a star. A cow would be, I have low growth market, but we're still making good, we have high market share. So what people typically do with the cow in their portfolio is they take the revenue from that and they reinvest into new growth markets. So it's a very common playbook for you have to have a portfolio. You've got the cash cow, right? And you're going to go into a new market with revenues from that cash cow because this market is not growing. So that's your cash cow, that's your star. The ones that say you have low market share, but its growth is a question mark. And so the key questions you're going to ask is, what's next? Are you going to reinvest into this product to capture more market share? Or is it not in your wheelhouse in terms of your IP? The reason it's a question mark is it's really, what are you going to do with this product? Because hope and a prayer is not a strategy, right? And then there's dogs, which is, these are the ones that, you know, if it breaks, you fix it. It's kind of on life support. It's not in a growth market and we don't have a lot of market share, but, you know, we eke out maybe $1 million in revenue or $300,000 in revenue a year. It's not huge for our portfolio, but, you know, dogs can be distractions if you've got a lot of them to chase that can detract you from investing in your star products. So for this, what's your strategy for each product? What research do you need to establish a go-forward strategy? So once you kind of lay out your products and lay out kind of what the competition is, it a growth market? Do we have potential in there here? Do I have question marks? Do I have stars? Many times you're asking, okay, I need to know more about this problem area in our market in order to put risky bets down on differentiating and capturing additional market share for our product. Or this product has been ignored and I don't know what the new problems to solve are. So I need to do research. I call it problem research, which is sit next to our users, sit next to our buyers, figure out what is on their roadmap for their business and align to fix it for them. So that's kind of how you lay it out. And then you would probably work with finance and research to kind of say, here's what I know or don't know about our product and my question marks about building a good product strategy, both from a buyer and market perspective to make us viable in the future. So that's looking at the revenue potential of the portfolio. And then I thought I'd just give you a side-by-side example, and products of course have been changed, but this is a template that comes straight from an M&A exercise that we did about 3 months ago with, as we're going through our portfolio of products. I took in and looked at the share of revenue of our suite of products and then applied the revenue and the growth trajectory of each of the products, target customers, strengths, areas of improvement, top competitors, and the current state within the PDLC and plan. So this is a good snapshot for both finance and executives to understand the core question of what do we got here and what should we solve in terms of, is this a growth market and is this product positioned to grow, and how much overall revenue does this product make in our portfolio? But this, all the content has changed, but you can kind of see in mine would be, you know, people who love cats, we get the strengths, word of mouth from cats, areas of improvements, cats don't like costumes, and then key competitors A, B, and C. And this is, it's good to say, I think we're under resourced for growth because we can only add 2 features on this product every month because it's such a tiny squad that's managing it. But this is a good speaking point to executives when it comes to a finance perspective. And with that, are there questions on finance? And it could be anything. Like I said, I had to work my way into understanding finance in order to be successful as a director or VP. So I'd be happy to take any questions that you might have.
I don't see a question at the moment here, but people, there's a comment here. This is great. So, I mean, that's positive. But yeah, everyone, please feel free to seed in questions anywhere along the time. And, you know, there will be multiple points to ask questions. And yeah. So a couple of questions. If you are kind of working with finance, any challenges that you have understood in understanding the financials of your product, any acronyms, because there are many in finance. What have you learned from your product or product portfolio and working with finance? Those are questions that I would have for you. And so I'll mention, yeah, so if anyone in the audience has questions on this, feel free to ping them related to that or others. There's a question here. What is the best text to get an intro to product finance? There's a Harvard Business HBR. I think it's the basics for product finance. Let me see if I can find that. In fact, I give it to some of my product managers. Awesome. Live on the fly resources. This is awesome. Yeah, there's one of them called Financial Intelligence, a manager's guide to knowing what numbers really mean. So that's a good one. And then the HBR guide to finance basics for managers is also a good one, just to understand how money comes in and out. You also, just so you all know, sometimes when you ask questions about finance, you realize that you've got to fix things in finance, like win-loss analysis out of Salesforce, or how they key in products within Salesforce
so that you can look at things like revenue attribution that come with product. So know that if you start asking those numbers with finance, you probably have a good partner to get the data or make it better.
Thanks. There's another question. Yeah. So yeah, what do we as PMs do that drive finance people crazy?
I would say that what drives finance people crazy is if you think it's a good idea, but you don't have the data to support it. So just believe me, this is going to work. Finance people, they're data driven. They want to see, do you have a financial model for this? The other thing that would drive them crazy is what I would call the build trap, which is keep investing in that product because you should, not because there's actually a growth market for it, especially strategy finance, like they're the ones that I'm often getting that we should put it on ice, that product on ice, for example. So they're going to be the ones that are pushing you for why, but I think it's a good way to strengthen your strategy, because why is it always a good question?
Great, thank you. Another question here. So in your experience, who owns forecasting of revenue and or product volumes, product or finance, or maybe another department?
Ultimately, the CEO has got to sign up for it because they have to send to the board. But what happens behind the scenes typically is there's somebody in commercialization, in product marketing, looking at pricing, for example, and you're getting buy-off from product sales and marketing and finance in putting together forecasts and financial models. And many times the conversations are things like, if we close this gap and if we added that new capability, I think we can move our forecast to up by 15 to 20% by the end of 2021. So it is a lengthy conversation to build something that we all believe in. And who ultimately owns that is going to be sales, because they have to deliver on the sales side. But it's work that is forecasted with dependencies on marketing, with dependencies on product development, and with kind of a sounding board with finance and commercialization.
Great, thank you. And so that question was on revenue. There is also a follow-up question on that in regards to, so now who is accountable for profitability?
For the profitability of the, yeah.
Yes.
That is a question that you want to ask up front for the product. So remember I said that a product is kind of, where is it at in its life cycle? Early in the life cycle, when you're just building out the product, or you're launching it, or you're in a growth factor, they're not looking for profitability. They're often looking at top line revenue. But once you get into grow, sustain, then they're looking at overall EBITDA data for how profitable is this to our business. And that is the question. Usually when you talk about the portfolio, I say, this product X is on maintenance mode. How do I get to the P&L of the product, the profit and loss of the product? If I don't have that, I can't make it profitable. So it's up to you to manage the profitability of the product, but you're the person making recommendations that can drive profitability of it. You're going to be pointing out the dependencies of what are blockers to more profitability, whether it's from ops, from customer service, from marketing, from sales. But ultimately, it's up to you to drive the strategy that would lead to more profitability.
Great. Another question here. So what's typical ROI on product spend execs look for? I.e., every dollar we spend, we want X return.
So this is why you need risk and leading indicators. Most products go to market in no less than 9 months. More typically, it's like a year and a half. And so if you look at ROI, what I typically do is say ROI out here in month 18, leading indicator that we're going to capture market share is going to be increased conversion. These features will make it parity with competitors. This feature will differentiate it and line it to the suite. So you're doing indicators that are going to grow your market, that will drive the revenue up, that will lead to the ROI on the investment. What you have to do as the product manager is to be the voice of reason and I would say the trailblazer in showing them this is profitability, because it won't happen overnight. And I think anybody who is looking for, especially from a financial perspective, I get this all the time, which is they're just looking for the slot machine. I put money in, profitable product comes out that gains market share. And I wish it was that easy. There's a lot of levers, but what you do want to do is, are we agreed on the levers that mean success? Then I'm going to knock those out one by one every 3 months, right? So that's how you're building trust, but leading to ROI, that's a long way out.
Awesome, thank you. And there was a follow-up question on when you mentioned needing data. The question is, what data must we provide?
What data must people, this is always, it depends on the question you're trying to answer. From a finance perspective, the data I need is, how big is this market? The TAM Samsung from a market share perspective. I need win-loss analysis from Salesforce, for example, or another CRM system. I need the P&L of the product, the profitability of the product, and then the investments that are going to lead to profitability. So if you put together a business case, what's the business case? What are the indicators? And then what equals to success? So those at a high level, I need to just understand what I have here, if it's going to grow or not, how much money does it make, how much profitability does it make. That's to start. And then you start the questions about what about and why, and then you start digging deeper. So it is a big puzzle, but it's a good puzzle to solve from a data perspective.
Awesome, thank you. That's all the questions for now. I'm sure there'll be more coming up as we go along.
Sure, yeah, no problem. And we have a lot to cover. Okay, working with design. This is what I would call design and user research. So typically when I start working with a larger team, I want to know, well, what's your design process? And you could start really tactically of, okay, we got to add a feature. What happens, right? What are the design tools? What are the handoffs between product and agreements of who makes the call? And then what does design need? And what are the challenges currently with design in design their portfolio? And it could be things like, we have 2 designers here and no designers here to support this product. So I think this product is really going to be hurting in terms of a UX perspective. But when I start conversations with design, I usually start with these 5-6 bullet items just to say, what is our current state of design? The next question in working with really desirability of the product, I typically want to make sure that user personas or user types or archetypes are in the hands of the designer. The reason being, sometimes you have very complex enterprise SaaS systems where there's product management over a whole functional area of the product. The continuity and glue that brings that product together is typically your user research team and your designers. The second thing that I would want to understand in the portfolio is, why do people buy this product? What job does it need to do for the buyers? And then, so this is, do you know what they expect to be done? And then how do you know you've solved it well? And then you have to test it. So have you done any user studies to understand the product and how it's used out in the wild? What do we do well, not do well on the product? How are your users getting jobs done with competitor products or other means? There's, sometimes people buy your products not how you sold them, or they don't buy any viable product that you think is solving it well because it just doesn't fit. So understanding that is really helpful. And then this is going to be key and a little bit different in managing a portfolio. How desirable is it for our products to work together? A lot of times when you're inside an organization, people assume, well, if we connected A product to B product, it's going to be awesome. Only to the hippos, which is the highest paid person in the organization. You really want to have understanding the task flow and the user flow of how people want those products to work together in order for value to be seen. And then how do they navigate between the products? So many times, if you've got a product portfolio, the go forward plan is going to be, make this product A part of product B. And so you're merging and building a platform. You got to think about how you're going to navigate it so that you can make that platform product. And then what do users want done next in our problem? Do we need research to explore this area and where? So these are some of the design factors to consider when you're thinking about the product and the product portfolio. In many cases with design, they are working just steps ahead of product, and they have a perspective that you might not see in terms of what products are in need of design debt that needs to be fixed and what products are just, they're bloated, for example, that we could streamline workflow on. So there's a lot that can be unpacked with conversations with design teams about the portfolio of products. And then the next part would be, is there questions on working with design and user research or UX in managing a portfolio?
I don't see a question just yet. I'm sure we might have some roll in. I will give a heads up that we have about 14 minutes till the 12:50 mark. So we might want to maybe let
just
people
keep
see
going.
the questions, and we can keep them, tackle the questions at the end there also.
Sure. Okay.
Thank you.
And then the next part is going to be on working with development. So these are the questions you're going to ask, especially if you're moving kind of from senior product manager or to director or VP, for example. When you work with development and you've got multiple products, you may have multiple teams staffed to multiple products. And so it's really important that you're going to be, whether you like it or not, in product measured on can you ship well? And so to do that, you have to understand what is our software development lifecycle. How do you estimate work across the products? How do you plan for the short and long term? How do you manage the tech roadmap and tech debt? Do you have a scrum of scrums? What about security and compliance? What about data governance and privacy? So you kind of have that whole picture going into development. The reason being is that sometimes when you're managing a portfolio, there's different SDLCs, there's different estimating plans. You don't know who's going to deliver or not. And the only way that you're going to get to something a little bit more cohesive is having bars and having standards that say, this is what good looks like, so that the rest of the engineering, your product team, your design team, and engineering, we're all on the same page about what the bar is. And there's not differences between it, because and you can have differences within reason, but you want to be for people to understand this is what good looks like across the portfolio as much as possible, because that's going to increase your flow and increase predictability of your velocity, for example. So you want to be a partner with your VP of engineering, your architects, your engineering management, to make sure that across the portfolio we have good standards and we streamline where possible. Some of the areas that I've looked to work with design to do this is mapping SDLC to PDLC. So if I want to do an MVP, can we get rough order of magnitudes of what that looks like? If I have user stories and acceptance criterion, what does good look like across all of our products? And then when and how do you pull in SMEs from engineering, such as an architect or a data architect? What about testing requirements? One of the things that I like to do is to have evergreen testing across browsers, across products, so that we can keep it simple as much as possible by saying, across the products, this is how it works. Across the products, this is how we test. Across the products, here's definition of ready, so that you're really building flow with a larger product development organization. I do quarterly planning. It's not going to be as heavy as SAFE, for example, but I do think it's helpful in planning out a long enough horizon, but not too long, for people to have the focus of the quarter, because there's nothing like the swag week to week, month to month of what are we doing and why. So I'm covering that quickly with engineering, but I can definitely deep dive if there's questions anybody has for that. And if not, I will continue to marketing. So
So a couple,
marketing, you have, yes, go ahead.
a couple questions have come up here. One,
Mm-hmm.
in enterprise SaaS, buyer and user personas can be different. What is your advice in addressing that in the design process?
We have the input for buyer and users from for if you do a design sprint, you know who the buyers are, you know who the users are. But generally speaking, I put the user personas in the hands of the designers for B2B and the buyer personas in the hands of product marketing for B2B as well. So they're definitely have an input, but it's more important that your users are happy in terms of the design sprints.
Great. And a couple more questions. How has COVID changed UX from your perspective?
I think the hardest part for me is I love the walls that show the user flows of what it takes to accomplish a task when you're developing a product and you're doing baseline heuristics, for example. So not having the walls are really hard. The other part too is that we set aside design time in order to solve the problem a quarter ahead of engineering, so we have the time to test it. So it has been harder post-COVID, mostly because I like working with people in their native environments in an office with whiteboards, and so I miss that. But we found ways to get through it by working collaboratively in smaller teams. And what I try to do is say, this is the problem to solve. This is how we know you've solved it. And I think build that trust with the design team that says, you solved it, keep going. So that they have that flow and you're not the hippo, which I think is key because they're closer to the users. They're interviewing the users and they're doing the research. So plan for the research as part of the design sprints. We really need that to build trust and understand problems for designers at a small level. Okay, is that the last question?
A couple more questions here, but
sure.
maybe wait till get them in now. Sure. So what is the suggested deliverables of quarterly planning with development?
Suggested deliverables is that we have all epics and we have user stories and acceptance criterion for the first 6 weeks, and we have it outlined roughly, and we have a shared understanding of what the following 6 weeks look like. If anything is, as a rule of thumb, I try to do this, if anything is larger than an 8 in terms of a Fibonacci, I try to break it down before quarterly planning. So nothing so big that it drives risks on the product. And then if we need to have a design sprint or an engineering sprint in order to reduce risk, I'll tell the executives we need to do this to make sure that we have a good understanding of the rough order of magnitude.
Great. One more questions. I know you still have another section, so maybe we'll wait till the end and we can answer all the rest of that perhaps.
Sure. Okay, that's good. Okay, this is, I believe, the last one. Yes. So this is the last one. This is going to working with product marketing. So the questions I ask again, what are the buyer personas you have for the portfolio of products? Do you have value props and positioning for each of the products? How do we position? How do our competitors position? Is there value in cross-product integration and cross-sell? So I want to look at the pricing, packaging, and positioning across the portfolio. So I understand, because we have a portfolio, do we have additional value that differentiates us? And it may be no. It could be that you are selling to qual and quant for my market, and they don't typically talk much together except for this one use case. So I'm going to narrow in on a problem to solve that one use case. But I think just a level set on positioning and packaging and differentiation is key in understanding the product. The next set of questions that I go through is these are called, the acronym is the pirate principle. So define R for each product. How do you acquire? How do you activate? How do you retain? How do you get to revenue? And how do you get referral for each of the products? And I think, is there work to be done here from the product perspective? Many times, if you're sitting in product marketing, you're trying to ensure the value of your product is seen by the market and we get revenue from it. And they are sometimes ... from the problem you're originally trying to solve. So having that frank conversation of, do we do well at activation and onboarding? That's a good problem to solve, because sometimes what you solve in product is not even in the user interface. It's in pricing that is confusing or hard to manage for the buyers. And there's nothing to fix there from a software perspective, but it's really hard for product marketing because of your product. So going through the pricing, packaging, and positioning of your product is going to be key. That way, the other part too is align your quarterly roadmap with product marketing. So you want to be able to say, here's the quarter of what we're going to do, and this is valuable, and this is valuable in terms of what we do. So be able to communicate really well to product marketing the value of what you're shipping, and then the word to add in terms of how much do we talk about that if something is in an alpha or a beta state. So that would be important in just aligning with marketing. We have some questions here. I'm just going to keep going. This is kind of the same thing of bringing it all together in terms of roadmap innovation. What you want to be able to do as you walk away from a portfolio is say, here's a summary of our products and how much revenue they're bringing. Here's our target customers, our strengths, our areas of improvement. And then this is going to be our roadmap focus. And typically, I try to make lines in the sand in terms of themes of focus for the next 12 to 18 months in terms of differentiation or streamlining the product, and then where it is in its PDLC. So this is just an example from M&A that we're doing now on what do we do next, because that's typically what you as the product manager person has to do. And when you talk about the portfolio, you have to do that at scale. So with that, I'm just going to leave it to questions that you might have. Design, marketing, development, happy to answer.
Yeah, so there's a couple questions here, selecting them. So solving customer problems often requires several products from a portfolio. How do you harmonize the financial view of these and the development view of these to get a harmonious prioritization of resources across the portfolio?
Yeah, so solving big problems is a challenge. The thing that you have to do, especially in a leadership role, is look at your problem that you're going to solve. So I'll take an example of, we don't get good results when we try to search for a doctor. That is not a 3-month problem to solve if you're talking about a healthcare portal. That's a year-long problem to solve. And so what you have to do as the leader in product is you're refining the problems to solve and saying, how do you know that you've solved them? So in that example, we broke up problems to solve into minute problems to solve. So for team A, you're going to be going through how people look for names of doctors within the taxonomy and the search algorithm. Team B, you're going to look at mapping specialty to core search terms within the product. So how do you make a big problem 5 small problems that are solvable within a quarter? If you're doing that correctly, then you have the focus of the teams and the product managers as well as engineering and design. So the thing that you need to ask yourself when you have that type of problem that takes 3 teams is, have I done user story mapping, for example, or have I broken it into problems to solve that are solvable within a minute time frame? And if they say no, then it's up to you as the lead to break that into mini problems.
Great, thank you. And I see we have 3 questions, but only 1 minute left. So I'll go with one of the shorter ones. Well, it's a comment first. Thanks for the presentation from Paul, another Paul, me as well though. Do you have any books you would recommend to follow up on these topics? I know you've mentioned some already, but are there some others you'd like to perhaps list out?
So sure, the 2 that I'm reading right now, Quantifying the User Experience, which is helpful from a data perspective. So that's a good one that I'm liking, because a lot of times you have to start with data to prove that you know how to make it better. And the second one just came out. It's Empowered, and that's by Marty Kagan. I'm a big fan of Marty Kagan. I'm kind of the opinion that if you're a good leader, you tell people what problem to solve, not how to solve it. So it's all about empowered, ordinary people, extraordinary products. Those would be the two that are on my list right now of things to read. But hopefully that will help, especially Empowered, because if you're in a leadership role, like that's what you have to do well. You're building a culture of innovation, and you've got to figure out what you have to stop doing and start doing to do that.
Awesome. And I guess one final one, if people have additional questions that maybe weren't answered or other things that came up, can they track you down in the conference or even via LinkedIn to ping you?
Yes, you can ping me. I'm on LinkedIn. You can ping me there, and I'll be at the conference tomorrow. I've got some meetings this afternoon, but I'd be happy to connect.
Awesome. Thank you so much for the presentation. I know people are also starting to dart away for some of these prizes and giveaways there, but thanks so much for your time there. That's fantastic. And yes, enjoy the rest of the conference for yourself, Julianne, as well as all the attendees.
Okay, thank you very much. Have a great day.